Hi, I'm Craig Gotwalls, Galaxy Marine Pro Staff, and I'm here on New Melones Reservoir with professional angler and local guide John Cherapati.
Today we're going to head down and see if we can pick up some jig fish here this morning. We're starting out at 9:45, and we just came off a major weather front. All the lakes out in the whole northern California have been real tough, but maybe with some of this water run-in, we might have some movement going on. We're on the second day of a weather change. Not the ideal conditions, but we're going to see what we can do, and it could be all right. So we're going to move up the lake here, up towards the first bridge, the Highway 49 bridge, and fish a couple points and see if we can get bit.
The lakes on California have been incredibly tough. For those of you that have been fishing or are in the industry or know what's going on, it's been Folsom, Berryessa, Oroville, Shasta, Clear Lake, the Delta. Every one of those fisheries has been incredibly tough for most of the month of February. But John's been one of the guys that's been consistently catching some pretty good fish. So Galaxy Marine and everybody decided to come down this part of the state for this show, hoping that we can get on some of these nice swim bait fish he's been catching up here.
Well, the key to catching these big fish this time of year, the one nice thing about Melones is we have really big, giant spotted bass here, and we have a good population of northern and Florida strain largemouth bass. And the big fish in these lakes really don't go that deep. They're off most of the major points, and that's where they live all year long. And if you can get the right conditions with a little bit of wind or cloud cover, these fish will bite. We have an underwater point here with a lot of rocks on it. We're going to start out with a jig. I got one that's kind of a green pumpkin and brown. I got a smallie beaver on the back, California 420. We're going to drag these slow over this break and see if we could get some bites up there tight. And why I fish, I'm going to be looking at this depth finder to see if there's some other fish hanging off deeper that we could either drop shot on or drag the jig in that depth of water.
I'm going to throw that which I know catches fish everywhere, and that's green pumpkin. So he's got a jig on. I've got a green pumpkin hula grub on a 3/8 ounce ball head jig. A lot of guys throw that on a football head jig. I like it on a ball head jig. You know, the old timer that taught me how to fish is a old fella from the East Coast, and he lives up on Trinity Lake. And he used to always say to me, "It doesn't really matter what color you're throwing, as long as it's green pumpkin." Talk to me about the water clarity here, John. Is this normal for this time of year?
New Melones and Don Pedro are very clear lakes. And the colder the water temperature is, you don't have plankton, your water is going to be that much clearer. The main lake will stay real clear. Up the river, we might get a little bit of color, but it's not going to be like being at Lake Berryessa or Clear Lake where you're going to have that mud come in here. You're never going to see that. This spot, if we don't catch fish here, I can tell you, in a couple weeks, this is a place that you're going to probably catch 25 fish here, and the only reason you're going to leave it is you're tired of getting bit.
I'm going to throw this Stacy 90 rip bait, and you know, this is not the Aurora Gold color, but it's a very similar color. It's a little bit more of a blue and a silver side looking bait. It's a great bait. Oh, and by the way, this time of year, when the water's cold, I like to put a little bit of lead under that bait. So you'll see I have a lead suspend strip where the bait connects to the bill, and what that does when you see this bait in the water is, instead of suspending perfectly, it'll actually slowly sink.
Okay, we just moved up above the Highway 49 bridge, and we're going to hit a couple points here in the main lake, see if we can see some fish on the meter, maybe throw a couple swim baits out here and see if we can get a bite here. We got a little bit of chop on the water, and we'll see if that will help.
So this is Carolina lunker sauce, and I started buying this because it is water soluble. And I've noticed that a lot of the scents that are sold, especially out here in the western United States, are oil-based, and they're not water-soluble. And if you do a little research on our friend Mr. Bass, you'll find out that the molecules of oil are so big they won't even fit into a bass's receptors. So if you don't have a scent that's water soluble, you're just wasting time.
I'm a firm believer in using scent at nighttime. I think that's more time that you need it than fish can't see as good. And I always have a lot of scent on my baits at nighttime. But during the day, unless it gets real slow like this, it's a good thing to try. Nothing hurts, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and try a big Huddleston out here. This is number 12 Shasta trout. As you see, I have no stinger hooks on here. I firmly believe that putting a treble hook behind this thing is bad for the fish. You know, you'll get them caught in the gill. So I'm going to take my chances that I'm going to get them to eat the whole thing, and I'm going to put a good hook set on them and get them in the boat. And most of the time I do.
Hey, what size line do you like to throw that hoodie on there, John?
You want to have powerful line, 20 to 25 pound test. Don't mess around.
Yeah.
You know, get those fish in the boat. When you get hooked on this bait, you're not fighting them. You're going to ski them in. Instead of going out there and try to scrape up a limit, you know, I'm going to be looking for these bigger fish moving up. And I know from here in recent weeks that there's some big fish swimming up here in this, you know, 20 foot to the bank range. So we're going to be looking at that most of the day. Instead of adjusting my style to, because other guys are catching fish, if you want to get that big bag, you know, you got to stick with what you know is going to work. Especially, you know, a swim bait, you know, once you get rolling on it, the biggest mistakes that people make is they pick up that swim bait and fish it for a half an hour and they don't get bit and they say this ain't working. Well, that swim bait's something you got to throw a lot. I mean, you got to commit, you know, 4 or 5 hours to throwing that bait, or maybe the whole day. We're moving up here on another spot that was like the first spot we were at, where you really can't see this point. There's a long extending point coming out underneath here. Hopefully we got some bass in here that might be ambushing trout.
So while John's trying to catch our stud fish here, he's throwing that big old Huddleston around. I've just decided I'm going to try and get bit, and this is my favorite bait to do that with. It's a 3-inch tube bait. This one happens to be made by Venom. It's got a scent impregnated in the plastic, and as you saw, I put some Carolina lunker sauce on there. The good thing about the lunker sauce is that it will last 30 minutes, 25 to 30 minutes before you need to reapply. Throw this on a really light line. This is 6-pound McCoy line, spinning rod. 702 Dobbins rod, fast rod. Everything's really light, really sensitive, and basically what you're trying to do here is just coax a bass into biting. I'm not trying to catch a huge fish. I'm just trying to get bit. I want to put one in the boat.
All right, we're going to get off this point and we're going to move a little farther up the lake here and try a few more points. And we're not seeing very many fish on here, which I thought would happen today and with this color, but we're just going to keep checking a few. It's good not to rule everything out just because a couple places don't have them, but if we don't get them here, we're going to have to try some deep stuff. So we're just going to keep poking along. Okay. We're pulling out some long points up here in the Horseshoe Bend area. I'm going to try the swim bait a little bit here. We got a little bit of chop on the water, and what's good to have the chop is it reflects the light, and it'll keep these fish up shallower, and then they tend to get more aggressive then. Especially on a bluebird day like this, we're going to take anything we get. This area's got some trees on it, a lot of ambush spots, so we're going to go ahead and give it a whirl here.
People ask a lot of questions about, you know, you hear when you watch these fishing shows, low light condition generally helps the bite. Cloud cover, wind chop on the water, storms, any, you know, dark in the morning, dark at night. Why is that? Well, the main reason that occurs is that the bass have a significant sight advantage over the prey fish that they're chasing in those low light conditions. In the low light conditions, if you look at the studies that have been done, those bait fish sight goes down to almost nothing, whereas the bass still retain a pretty good amount of their vision. So as a bass, you're feeling like your predatory advantage is now so much greater because that light condition's down and you want to go do some eating. So hopefully they're going to do some eating up here. Let's catch some fish. Okay, well, he's throwing that trout painted tennis shoe. I'm going to go back to my hula grub, see if we can't get bit here. Guys that run the front of the boat love when people come from the back seat and do things like that.
I've never had one do that. What I'm doing with this Huddleston is we got some long points out here, and because things aren't too active, I'm letting this thing sink all the way to the bottom. It could be 25, 35 feet. And then I'm slow rolling this bait back in, just trying to get one of these big ones to bite if they're here. Obviously today yet I haven't seen them. Usually when I got a point that's got a lot of big fish on it, I'll see these fish on my depth finder. You know, I mean, they're tunas down there. The key on this, for me, with these Huddlestons, is to fish them real slow. You're almost fishing them like you're crawling a worm or something. I just switched over to a Osprey premium talon and a chartreuse shad. And haven't been getting any luck on these big fish on these bigger baits, so I kind of scaled down a little bit. Maybe there's some spots out here suspended. And I got a guy who's about ready to lose a Huddleston in the back of my boat.
I got
you
it.
Get it there?
Yeah. I wasn't going to interrupt you. I got it.
This bait, because it's good for spots, it's the only one I put a stinger hook on in the back tail. I've got a red number 4 hook back there. And if a little 2-pound spot takes a whack at the tail, you got a good chance of hooking them. Well, it's that time of year, you know, the swim bait will make and break you in a hurry. You know, it just, all they have to do is start biting. I mean, you're waiting for that same thing to happen with a jig or anything else, so you might as well just go big or go home, I say. All right, let's make a move here, man. This area ain't happening. Typical Melones. You leave one place with wind, you go somewhere else, it's like glass. I've been guiding out on Melones since about 95, when I moved up from the Bay Area. I used to guide in the Delta for years. We have a lot of good fishermen in the Motherlode. Always has been. And once you learn how to fish this clear water, these lakes have all kinds of structure where you can fish trees, you can fish deep, and it gives you a good education on bass fishing. I tell my clients, when they call me, if they want to go to new Melones and throw the swim bait, I tell them, hey, you know, we could get no bites, we can get 10 bites. But if they want to just catch fish, and I have the option of going from new Melones to Don Pedro to Tulloch to Salt Springs, and I'm going to take them where the bite's the best. You know, if that's what they want to do is catch fish. And that all depends. Most of the time it's here at new Melones because you're getting a lot of bites. Today, you know, we haven't bared down yet and tried to get a lot of bites. We're still looking for old Mo here somewhere. You know, I kind of learned this when I was a kid. We used to fish for bluegill off a dock, and you'd catch bluegill after bluegill with a red worm, and all of a sudden the bluegill would disappear. And I was probably 8, 9 years old, and here'd come these bass.
Yeah.
And then bluegill would disappear for about a half hour. We'd never catch them.
Yeah, Mr. Bass was in town.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden the bass were done with their feeding period, and the bluegill would all come back. And that's when I learned how these fish have feeding periods. Even though the conditions aren't right, we're going to give it a few more spots, and then we'll go out and try some sunken islands and see if we can dredge some up.
We'll dredge them up. It's just been, we weren't kidding. It's been the toughest January and February, not just for me. I mean, I've been asking all kinds of guys in anticipation of doing articles and doing this show, and nobody's catching a lot of fish right now. It's just not happening.
A lot of guys do fish Texas rig drop shot, but I'm going to show you something that's a little different. Because when you Texas rig, your worm tends to roll over when you got it nose hooked on there. So the way I do is I got a 4-inch worm here. I got a size 1 hook, Gamakatsu EWG, and I'm going to go in that nose like you normally do. But I'm going to go a little farther. I'm going to pull that worm up. I'm going to back it through the flat side here. You want to get right in the middle. And I slide this worm up over the hook. My fishing partner, Joe Bruce, came up with this, and he's just a great drop shot fisherman. Okay, now we got that worm nose up on the line quite a bit. And we're going to take this worm. You go through a lot of worms this way. And when it's straight on the shank there, we're going to split the line through the bottom with the one with the tag in with the weight, and then I'm going to split right through the top with the other part of the line. Now my line is actually back in that worm about 1/4 of an inch. And what that does, seems kind of crazy, is we're going to get here in the water, and that's going to keep my worm sitting straight, whether it's a 4-inch worm or a 6-inch worm. But that bait is not going to roll over. It's going to glide straight in the water like that. The thing that's different about this year at New Melones is usually these banks are covered with people trout fishing, and the trout seem to be getting let go and going deep. They stock them here in the ramps, and usually that's a good place to be throwing these swim baits, but the trout aren't hanging around. So if you get on these points that are close to these, like we just left over here, these areas where they plant them.
And we're nowhere near a ramp, just for the record.
Yeah.
Nowhere near one.
You know, these trout are migrating around here. I think the water's actually too cold for the trout.
The Huddleston trout comes in 0, 5, 12, and 16. What that means is, if you count to 10, that's how many feet it will sink. It'll either sink 0 feet, 5 feet, 12, or 16 feet. I pretty much just throw the 12, and I very rarely throw the 5. I don't even own a 16 or a 0, and I probably should own a 0. But is the 12 the most popular for you on this lake, John?
12's the most popular bait. So let's see if we can get on top of this hump right here.
This hump is in, what, 70 feet of water? No, we're off to the side of it.
It should come up here into like 45 feet. Sometimes you'll come out here one spring day, we'll get to the right temperature, and you'll come down to the boat ramp, and these bass will be just swimming all over the place. That's typical what you're going to see in spring.
Huh.
I mean, all of a sudden, they're all going to come out of the woodwork and go right to the bank.
This is probably one of the best go-to styles of fishing. The bait is actually suspended about 2-3 feet above the weight on the line. And we're fishing vertically in 43, 45 feet of water here on an island top. And you're basically just, I mean, some guys will shake a drop shot. I noticed John's, you know, kind of shaking his a little bit, bringing it up and down. I just try and, you know, make bottom contact and just move it real slow up and down there, just trying to get a fish to want to eat it. And if I bring it up and show you what it looks like, you'll see it's just a real small, finessey bait, real subtle, tiny little open hook. And when you put that down in the water, see, it just, you don't have to move it very much, and it's got a lot of action. That's a little 4-inch curly tail shad-colored robo worm that I'm using. And you know, usually this is a great way to just get a bite. What are you going to throw back in this little cut here, John?
There's some trees underwater. I'm going to run a HUD over the top of them.
Okay.
We just saw a couple fish shallow. We just get one to bite. You know, on tough days like this, fishing in Melones, it makes you a good fisherman. There's a lot of good fishermen come out of the mother lode because they know how to experience this kind of bite, and they don't let it get to them, you know. They know the fish are here. This is not a typical day for this lake, but for some reason, it's just hard to find these fish. We've looked deep, we looked shallow. See if we can pull one out of these trees here.
I tried that tube, the tube didn't work, so now I'm going to try a little finessey worm, just see if I can get bit. And I like what the captain's doing up front. He's going to go down swinging. He's going to go with the woman that brought him here, and that's the big, huge swim bait. And he's just going to, if he catches one, it's going to be a big old, big, fat pig toad, and it's going to make the day all worth it, all in one swipe.
Moving up on some submerged islands here now. There's a whole 2 rows of hills that come down this arm. Being that everything else hasn't worked, we're going to this route. Hopefully we'll see some fish on here. Notice this, we're moving into this angel's arm. See how there's more color already?
Yeah, the water.
There's a big bar that comes off this thing out this way. It's got no trees or anything on it, so you can drag nice and clean. Got him. Yay. And it's a giant.
Yeah,
This is why we come.
That's the way I like to see it, Champate. Woo-hoo-hoo!
Yeah, I saw that little sucker out there and got her to bite.
Yeah, this is awesome, dude. That's awesome.
He's down there somewhere. Got one. He don't feel too big.
We're stroking him now, Johnny.
Oh, he's a giant.
It's a huge, that's a hog.
That's a yellow bass.
That's a donkey bass right there.
Deep water. Another small, pale largemouth. I'll let him go and get back down deep. Today we went through, have a lot of rods up on the deck, but basically I was throwing a BBZ1 floating mat trout. Didn't work that good, but I threw it today on an 806 ML Dobbin swim bait rod. Heavy line, 20-pound gamma. The other bait we threw on the same rod was a Shasta ROF 12 Huddleston. Got one here with a few teeth marks on there. That we just got bumped on once. And when we fish deep, for the most part, we went with the drop shot rig. And I was throwing this bait, which is a keeper worm, a 1001B. And a few other worms we threw today, but this was the one we ended up with. And I threw this rod, that is a Dobbins, let me get it right, 702. And I'm throwing it with a Rebel reel and 6-pound test line. It's a nice light rod, no fatigue, loads up really easy. And then earlier in the day we started with a jig. This is a 705 Dobbins rod, 12-pound gamma line. Maybe I should have went a little lighter with the clear water today without any wind. Threw it on a 3/8 ounce jig. It's got a California 420 on the back, and it's basically a green pumpkin, red flake, and brown jig. 3/8. And that's what we went out with. Well, let's recap today a little bit. We went out on a bluebird day. We never got any wind at all. We went big. We had one follower, a spot that was about 4 pounds. We seen a couple more about that size, got tapped on the Huddleston once, but we stuck with it, even though the conditions weren't right. The best thing that I think we could have done better today was went up the river and fished the steep walls, but we're kind of hoping maybe some of these fish moved up. The water's been warming, but we went from every depth from up on the bank out to about 55 feet, and we're just seeing a fish here and there. Had one fish on the drop shot that pulled off and one dink, but that's what happens this time of year, and you got to be ready for it. It seems like recently the best bite on these lakes have been when it's storming or coming into a storm. So if you go out on a day like today, don't get discouraged because it changes. I fish, being a guide, I'm out all the time, and you can have 4 real good days and 3 days with hardly nothing. But today was real bad. But Craig had his line in the water all day. I had my line out there, and we gave it the college try, and we kind of came up with a big zip. Just wait till next month. They'll be biting.